Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. It is that time once again to be venturing around the universe with Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor in the third volume of the third series of Big Finish audio drama adventures with 9, this time entitled Buried Threats. This box set is available to order now on the Big Finish website in both physical CD and digital download formats. It can also be purchased as part of a bundle alongside the other volumes within this series so far, although something of which that I kind of think is both this series' strength and weakness is every single box set is unique. It doesn't require any prior listening, they're all standalone, so if you've not listened to the previous volumes of Series 3, that doesn't matter. You can listen to this one if you want to, if it takes your fancy, and that same thing applies to the rest of the Ninth Doctor adventures as well. You can very much cherry pick as you wish. Now this box set does in fact contain exactly the same format to all of the previous Ninth Doctor series really, with the exception of Volume 1 Ravages, all of which are standalone 1-hour stories, the first of which is A Theatre of Cruelty, as written by Lisa McMullen, the second episode is The Running Men, as written by Mark Wright, and the third and final story is Ancient History, as written by Matt Fitton. And this time, of course, the big selling point of this box set, other than the Ninth Doctor himself, of course, is the return of none other than Lisa Bowman as Big Finish royalty. Bernice Summerfield is such a treat for Big Finish listeners who have been kicking around for quite a number of years. After all, Bernice is kind of where Big Finish all started. But is it any good? Well then, let's take a look. So the first episode of this box set is A Theatre of Cruelty, as written by Lisa McMullen, and this is a rather fun story to start off this set. It definitely captures the excitement, history and bizarreness of Doctor Who overall. So the TARDIS doorbell rings, because the TARDIS has a doorbell now for some reason, but the TARDIS is still in flight, so who can it be, and how are they right in the middle of the time vortex? Writer Antonin Artaud is creating a play which utilises the audience senses as the main focus of the story itself to kind of generate an immersive experience. The play itself is centred around Beatrice Centime and the way that she murdered her father. It's a topic of which that Anthony seems rather obsessed with, except the inspiration and history surrounding the play seems a little bit too real to be true, with the main historical figures themselves seemingly having a little bit of a say in the actual production and writing of the play itself, which naturally is not really meant to happen. I'm not too familiar with the forms of theatre storytelling, but I feel like I got a decent understanding from this story, and I now understand that Anthony was basically a very influential figure after his lifetime in the creation of immersive theatre, so I feel like I learnt something from this story, which is nice, and I think that Lisa McMullen has definitely educated me as a listener, which is always nice. I like stories that educate me about history, and I feel like it definitely adds a very human element to the narrative, which that is definitely this story's strength. The narrative is rather interesting, and given the concept of theatre of cruelty, us listeners are transported on that journey. At times, scenes may seem a little bit disorientating, a little bit confusing. Characters kind of pop up and go, and it has this brilliantly limitless sort of freedom to it, as if you're kind of experiencing the writer's dream within this story, which I thought was rather fun. And of course, within the audio drama format, the sound design and everything about the story's production, it's very impressive. Anthony Artaud is excellently brought to life by Alexander Valos, of course known at Big Finish for playing Dorian Gray, and he's a delight to listen to. I think he and the Doctor's relationship really makes this story work. Oddly, both of these characters kind of hook you into the episode itself. The vast majority of the dialogue is theirs. Yes, there is kind of odd side characters here and there, but 9 and Anthony alone really carry the story because the performances themselves are so attention-grabbing. You kind of focus on their dynamic, their back and forth. The actual idea of the episode itself also really intrigued me, the whole thought process of writers seeking ideas from the past, the Doctor seemingly becoming also integrated within Anthony's creative process, which is a rather personal thing, and within that we also have Anthony's personal life experiences, a rather tragic sort of life experience influencing the way that he creates, which I think was really delicately and effectively approached within this episode. Eccleston really sells this story too. I think it's very clear from the behind the scenes that he's very knowledgeable about this particular area of theatre, and because of that, I feel like the episode really is rewarded by his performance. I think that you definitely get that sense that he has to do the episode justice. It's very much like the football episode that we got, I think, within the previous volume, that episode had a very northern theme to it, so I feel like Eccleston was very personally integrated within the episode, and as a result, you really felt like you were in the Doctor's hand within that story, and you're being taken on this adventure. Much like the plot, the Ninth Doctor is very fast-paced, very energetic, but also so keen to hear people's personal stories. He's a very personal Doctor. I think that he sees everyone as important, and that is one of the beauties of the Ninth Doctor. He always seems very normal. He's an everyday bloke, but he has a mystery. His history is something of which that is blurred, and every so often he kind of reveals his capabilities, his Time Lord superiority, I suppose, but he only reveals this when he really needs to play that card, meaning that for the most part he kind of just blends into society, and that's what makes the Ninth Doctor so special. He blends in when he needs to, but he also shows his intelligence, and that really shines through when he needs to as well, like when confronting mysterious monsters. So I think that this story really captures that spirit of the Ninth Doctor TV stories. So yes, there is a little bit of alien involvement within this episode as well, and I think the episode could have easily fell into the realm of technobabble towards the end, but thankfully the episode sways away from that and it plays to its strengths, being the characters. The aliens do have enough presence within the episode to remain effective, and I think that the whole concept behind them and the history element is really, really intriguing, but I like the way that the humans within the story remain the prominent focus. I think it's a really interesting way to integrate aliens into history, but also representing the story of a real historical figure. It's a really effective blend of different experiences all coming together: dreamscapes, creativity, aliens, the Doctor being the Doctor. So overall, it's a very exciting package of storytelling. So next up we have The Running Men, the second story of the set as written by Mark Wright. The Doctor arrives in Halifax and the town is going through its own regeneration, with grand plans for the future, moving away from the past. Annalise Avonlea has a vision of a new building in the centre of the town, but the development is causing concerns within the local community. I relate to this story on a rather sad level, because even if I want to put a new design of bin in my town, it seems to cause controversy. Although, to be fair, I think the uproar within this story is particularly justified. And that is because Frank Kelsey believes this new building will destroy valued, historically significant landmarks. Going on the facts presented within this story, I'm going to presume that this episode is maybe set in the early 2000s, simply because said local council actually has money to do redevelopments, which I don't think that happens anymore. Meanwhile, the Doctor meets Ambika Desai of West Yorkshire Police and is about to be taken in for questioning, as he's acting a little bit suspicious. And it is on that journey to the police station that they discover a body, and the mystery unfolds from there. As always, it's great having a Doctor Who story actually set in the north of England. Every time it happens, I feel like it's a rather special thing, especially being from the north myself. The 13th Doctor era tried to do this, setting a few stories in Sheffield, but sadly I don't think it ever quite used these locations to its advantage. Again, I think that this story has a lot of personality. It uses history multiple times throughout to present a very sci-fi tale, and what I love about this episode is it uses history to its advantage, and I actually feel like I learnt a little bit about Halifax from this plot, which is really nice, and that's absolutely down to Mark's writing, but also the excellent portrayal of Frank by Simon Rouse, who is basically the font of all local knowledge within this story, and it allows for lots and lots of exposition dumping, but in a very natural way, especially when Frank is kind of discussing his own opinions to the Doctor. I think when you tie alien invasion to actual real history, it makes for a much more interesting piece of storytelling, because it moves beyond just a simple bog-eyed monster invasion plot. And then you have characters like Ambika within the story as well, a police officer who's very passionate about her job, again excellently portrayed by Fiona Wade, who is in fact known for being in Emmerdale, or has been in Emmerdale for quite a number of years, so it's really exciting getting these rather big names into Big Finish. I do believe she said in the behind the scenes this is the first job she's actually done after leaving Emmerdale, which is quite a big thing. I think that she really matches Nine's energy, and from scene 1 they make a great team. The Ninth Doctor range is starting to remind me quite a lot actually of Inside Number 9 in a weird way, except unlike Rhys Smith and Steve Pemberton being the reoccurring names throughout each and every story, Christopher Eccleston is the constant, and then each episode they spin the wheel of potential companions and see where it lands, and this means that we get lots of varied personalities being potential companions, such as historical figures like how we've seen within the previous story, but also varied ages as well. We get some younger, some older, also people from entirely different planets. One which springs to mind instantly is Vix from the previous volume, Travelling Hope, the episode below there as written by Lauren Mooney and Stuart Pringle, where she was on the space station, isolated in the depths of space, all alone, an excellent character, and she absolutely sold the location of the story and the situation that the Doctor found himself within. And I think that by doing this, it ensures that the characters that we have within the stories aren't cardboard cutouts. The episode is absolutely make or break on these people being believable and someone of which that the listener can actually relate to. And I think that this is a story that very much relies on that too, the whole idea of local knowledge. You're very much in this little microcosm society where this is their entire world. These are people in Halifax and they are wanting to protect their history, whilst also embracing the future as well. Again, very much like how I've mentioned in previous reviews, I think this definitely sacrifices the whole point of direction with this series, and The Running Men is a good example of a story which I think is a very, very easy listen. I think if you just simply want to be entertained by a little bit of Doctor Who for an hour, then this is a great story to do that with. I think it takes you out of real life, and I think that it's a story that doesn't require too much of the mind. You're taken on a journey. The Ninth Doctor is such a welcoming Doctor to listen to. But certainly when you compare it to other series, I suppose you could say that the plot itself is somewhat basic, but still has so many layers to it. It just is all self-contained. So suppose if you are new to Big Finish, then this episode is perfect for you, or simply if you are a little bit tired of the very plot arc heavy series. Although what I will say is I don't think The Ninth Doctor Adventures at Big Finish is a series that you can binge. I think you can definitely binge a box set, but I don't think you can binge from volume to volume simply because there's nothing really tying the box sets together. The concept of the Running Men is also quite fun. Again, I like the ties to history. I think that really makes them work. And I also think that they are nice to visualise in the mind if you're someone who likes visualising your audio dramas. I would have liked to see a little bit more from them. I think that they are a decent four, although you don't really get too much dialogue with them. Annalise Avonlea is a great character as well, very real. I feel like Mark has taken a very real problem where sort of council members are accused of being sort of corrupt and, I don't know, perhaps working in alliance with aliens, and, you know, this episode takes that to the extreme, but it works. The whole format of this story I think is very satisfying, and it just feels very New Who, having these two people with very, very normal but brilliant lives exposed to the world of the Doctor, and they are taken on this adventure throughout the story into the early hours as it unfolds. There's police car chases, there's alien invasion, there's people at threat of losing their life, and then there's a few fight scenes in there as well, just for fun. It's lots of drama, lots of action. The Ninth Doctor's loving it. I definitely get the sense he is a Doctor that is just addicted to energy and having fun, and I think he just enjoys being surrounded by humans. And it's very interesting because we have a Doctor that is so keen to learn about people, and yet he is still keeping his distance. He's still a very mysterious figure, to the point where they can glimpse his world, but they're not allowed to stick around for long. So Ancient History concludes the set as written by Matt Fitton, a dig into the past to find out more about an ancient race which completely disappeared from history. This is the moment the Ninth Doctor gets to meet none other than Professor Bernice Summerfield. What a special moment indeed. One thing which I'm really grateful for with the Ninth Doctor range is that each and every story isn't a who can we put the Ninth Doctor with now scenario, because I fear that's what the Diary of River Song series kind of got known for towards the end. Of course, we have had a few stories previously within the range where we have seen the Ninth Doctor team up with the likes of the Brigadier as well as Liv and Tanya. For the most part, this series has offered standalone independent stories which don't rely too much on returning foes. universe, which I think that is something the Ninth Doctor range can really be respected for. But if you're going to pair the Ninth Doctor with anyone, I think that Bernice Summerfield is a very logical and effective decision. Stories like this have a purpose for the Ninth Doctor, and it's to interact with his current issues that he's got going on, leading to him meeting Rose and of course starting a new chapter. If anything, stories like this are the perfect presentation of that divide between classic and new eras. Benny knows the Doctor better than most, meeting many incarnations of the Doctor across the years and becoming great friends with the superb Warner Doctor from the Unbound universe. Therefore, she is in prime position to question why the Ninth Doctor acts how he does, like making false aliases to go undetected and diversions from answering questions, much like how he does multiple times throughout this episode. This is a Doctor who is still discovering who he is, recovering his identity after the events of the Time War. And naturally, when you hide yourself from one of your good friends, this is bound to hurt Benny's feelings. One of the challenges that this story faces is the fact that Bernice has such a comprehensive backstory, and something of which that I can praise anyone who has listened to the entirety of it. And I think a big problem for this series is the adventures of Bernice Summerfield and the Ninth Doctor adventures speak to two very different types of Big Finish listener. I would consider the listeners of the Bernice series perhaps being more longer term experienced listeners who have been around for quite a while, and then you have the listeners that are perhaps new to Big Finish, maybe focused more on the new series licensed stories, and therefore haven't delved as much into the back catalogue. And therefore for me, I think that as someone who has listened to and loved the Unbound Doctor adventures with Bernice, I think that this story does certainly miss a little bit of an opportunity, of which I briefly touched upon as well within my review of Once and Future with the episode of the Ninth and Warner Doctors, although due to the degeneration problems seen within that series, the Ninth Doctor that was present wasn't actually the Ninth Doctor, so they couldn't really reflect on the events of the Time War. And I think if anyone would be able to encourage the Ninth Doctor or help move them on to their new chapter in life, Bernice is absolutely perfect for that, as after all, the relationship that she had with the Unbound Doctor basically parallels the Doctor that we have present within this story, and that is the themes of loss. Of course, the Ninth Doctor is dealing with lots of loss, and equally the Unbound Doctor was dealing with his universe basically being utterly destroyed and therefore losing everything that he knew. And at that point he utilised Bernice Summerfield as an anchor to a different universe, and from there they became very good friends. But most importantly, Bernice, I think, gave him the inspiration and excitement to travel a universe once again and have lots of adventures, and I think that this story certainly missed out on that opportunity for the Ninth Doctor to open up a little bit more and parallel the relationship development that we've seen within the Unbound series. For the most part, the Ninth Doctor does open up a little bit, although not as much as I would have expected, really. I think it would have been really cool if this story was in fact a bit of a stimuli for the Ninth Doctor to go away and experience the events of Rose, and of course this series takes place in no specific order, meaning that from a release standpoint they could easily go back to doing some earlier stories within the next volume anyway. That said, I do still like the dynamic that Bernice and the Doctor have. It's still full of energy and adventure, and I think that is carried throughout the vast majority of this story's plot. I also love the way that time travel is directly influencing the whole archaeology theme that we see within this story. It's kind of like, here is the ancient relics, and here is them brought to life and trying to kill you. It's quite immersive. The physical and quite literal digging up of the past are all rather clever, and the echoes of the Time War certainly make this adventure feel like it's the Doctor picking up the pieces. I certainly like the idea that this is an aftershock story of the Time War, and one day the Doctor didn't just wake up and all of a sudden everything to do with the Time War was done and sorted. It makes sense to have overlap stories like this, as everything in the universe is never quite that neat where things just finish. The Korovin are an interesting foe. They certainly seemed very alien. I think they had a presence that did seem quite deadly and scary, although I think maybe the balance was lost a little bit within this episode due to that focus on Nine and Benny. I think that the foe maybe lost out a little bit, with a lot of the attention being diverted away from them. I always find Bernice very comforting because she's always very consistent. She always sticks with her beliefs, and regardless of who she is interacting or sharing the scene with, she always feels like Benny, and I think that is absolutely down and the way that Lisa plays the character. I think that she knows Benny inside out, and it's very interesting, especially in an episode like this, where you may think that, especially given that Nine was the Doctor that I grew up with, I am going into this story, and he is the character that I'm following. But if anything, I was more excited to see Benny interacting with Nine, not Nine interacting with Benny, if that makes sense. Especially given the archaeological themes within this story, it did very much feel like Nine was interrupting Benny's world rather than the other way around. And I suppose as well causing a little bit of chaos. I love the way that he uses an alias, he goes unknown, and to start with, Benny seems rather annoyed or frustrated with the way that he acts because he's disrupting her activity. And I think that the plot does a great job of highlighting both characters, Benny's familiarity, the skill, the knowledge that she possesses in sort of threatening situations, but it's also a very different dynamic to the usual Doctor-companion relationship, because Benny ultimately brings far more knowledge in this situation than the everyday companion, especially in a series like this where basically everyone in the companion role is essentially a guest character. You could perhaps even go on to say that Benny is playing the role of the Doctor within this story, or the Doctor that we know, because Benny has an assistant with the character of Twisk, and she has quite a nice journey within this story. I won't say too much else, but it's a nice heartwarming story, and I like the way that both Benny and the Doctor interact with her. So yeah, it does very much feel like Benny's world, and I think it's a very fun but accessible story. I think, again, if you are a newcomer to Big Finish, then this is a very easy story to listen to. It's not too taxing, and the plot is easy to follow. So there we go, that is my review of the Ninth Doctor Adventures box set entitled Buried Threats. 3 varied stories, lots of fun, and perfect for listeners who are wishing to get into new series Doctor Who on Big Finish. And as always, it is a joy to hear more from Christopher Eccleston, although similar critiques apply to this box set, which I've stated within previous reviews of this series as well. Where you have standalone stories, of course it's very nice for variety and many different types of characters, but overall I think that the series certainly lacks a purpose and direction between the volumes, but it does certainly cater to many different themes of story. But who knows, maybe one day we will see a companion alongside Nine. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for regular Doctor Who content. Have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time.